Before we leave the topic of alerts, I want to just point out a couple of things. I mentioned them briefly in a number of different fashions in some of the other videos, but I want to make sure I cover it because this can really create some issues for you. A couple of things. You want to be careful with your jobs. It's really cool and it feels really Joe technical and Joe SQL and all that kind of stuff to create one massive job that just does everything. You know, it's got 26 steps here and it backs up everything and rotates the tires and does everything. Be careful with that. That job is going to run for quite a while and it can create some other issues for you. One other thing I wanted to show you too is once you get that job up there, notice you can script that job out. Well, I didn't make any changes, so I can't see it, but I can script changes to that job out. Something else you'll notice, I can script a job out here as a create to a new query editor window. And this is a great way to back up. Now notice that's the transact SQL to create that job. Now I can save that to archive that somewhere. I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but I can archive this somewhere, and if anything ever happens to my job, just simply re-execute this and recreate the job. Okay, so I'll close that. So be careful with the jobs. Don't let them get too large. You're better off to have multiple jobs than to have one massive job if you can possibly get around it. The next thing is with your alerts. Be very careful on your alerts, and let me show you when we get in here. You got a couple of things to be aware of. First of all, in this one, I was doing a % log use. I was watching a transaction log. If it rises above 70%, then I want it to notify me. There's going to be some lag time in here. There always is. Don't set this thing at 95%. Because by the time it rises above 95% and you get notified and get to the office or call someone at the office or whatever, this thing's already filled up, your database is locked up, and people are screaming and your phone's ringing off the hook. So make sure you give yourself enough room to get in there. The next thing is, on these things, make sure that you give yourself enough time between responses. If you set this too close, then it will simply trigger response after response after response and keep alerting you. And in the meantime, instead of trying to fix the error, net sends are popping up constantly, and it just tends to drive you nuts. If you've ever been in an outage situation where you can't fix the problem for management folks calling asking what the problem is and how long it's going to take, the answer is, I could have been finished by now if you people would stop calling. Same thing here. Just be real careful with these things. So also, on the alerts, make sure that you have a limited number of administrators setting these things up. I've seen it before where 5 or 6 administrators start putting a lot of really cool ideas together. Unfortunately, they don't mesh well, and they end up working the server way too hard, doing redundant things, doing all kind of weird, bizarre things. So make sure you work together as a team on this, and you plan these out and test them, and make sure you're getting what you thought you were getting on these jobs and alerts. So that's pretty much jobs and alerts. Take what I've given you here in a very simple form, add to it and play with it. And back when Microsoft first rolled out SQL 7.0 and they mentioned all these alerts and jobs, they used the term zero administration, and everybody kind of chuckled because when Microsoft back then said zero administration, it meant you were going to be there real late on the weekends. And you know what? They surprised us. This thing really worked. You can spend a week or so and get your server to the point that it really will watch itself and email you and let you know how things are going. And you can really get about the business of doing what they hired you to do, which is to manipulate the thing or to manage the thing as opposed to babysit it. So that's alerts, jobs, and operators.